Timuel Black migrated with his family from Alabama in 1919. Growing up in the notorious Black Belt in the South, he quickly learned the ways of the world and learned early on the rules to follow to avoid trouble. In Chicago, he attended Burke Elementary School and DuSable High School. Black was 23 years old when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and that led to his service during World War II.
Until World War II, I couldn't even cash a check at the bank outside the community. They, because of their ambition, because of the concentration, created parallel institutions.
After his return home, he would attend Roosevelt University, and he received a master's degree at the University of Chicago. In 1960, Black worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when the civil rights leader came to the city to protest housing issues for poor residents living on Chicago's West Side. 3 years later, he would help organize the Chicago contingent of 2,000 people that would attend the historic march on Washington.
I have to carry that dream in my mind and in my heart. I have an obligation to this man who articulated for me and many more the dream of the world as it ought to be.
He ran and lost his first campaign for alderman, but he was instrumental in the historic election of Harold Washington as the first African-American mayor of Chicago. In 1991, a young activist by the name of Barack Obama wanted to become a community organizer in Chicago, so he sought the advice of Professor Black. Black would attend the inauguration of the first African-American president of the United States.
He becomes one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, political figures in the whole world. Now that dream, ooh, very few of us could have had the feeling about that kind of dream personified by a person of color.
But Professor Black said while history was made with President Obama, we still hadn't quite fulfilled the dream of his good friend Dr. King for a post-racial society.
Race has not been overcome. It's still a part of this society.
Black, who made a living off of history, would live to see much of it. In 2018, he turned 100 years old. And while the centenarian had slowed, he never stopped fighting for civil rights for all.
Keep the faith, take care of yourself, go to bed at night and get a good night's sleep, and start all over tomorrow.
Great advice. He said that because he needed the energy to continue the fight every day. And despite his age, Timuel Black was still active and believed he had a lot more to do and a lot more to offer. Now this afternoon, we caught up with a very close friend and the spokesperson for the Black family.
He thought his work and his best work was still ahead of him because there were still people that he had not touched, he had not spoken to, and he had not moved. He was very interested in young people. They were fascinated to hear not only his stories, but the story of his life. Someone that lived 102 years, someone that walked and marched and became friends with Dr. Martin Luther King, someone that inspired Barack Obama, someone that helped get Harold Washington, the first Black mayor of the city of Chicago, elected. I mean, his legacy is huge.
What a legacy we are talking about. And Cheryl, we also know that you interviewed Mr. Black many times. What are your reflections about this extraordinary man?
Well, today, a voice of the voiceless has been silenced. And one of the most fondest memories with Professor Black was when he was headed to Washington, D.C. to witness the inauguration of the first African-American president of the United States. He was so emotional and inspired because he thought it would never happen in his lifetime. They were also neighbors, and when Barack Obama started his campaign for the White House, he was young. He was beginning a career in politics, so he sought the advice on how to become elected to the highest office in the land from Professor Black. We were there with Mr. Black on his journey to what he called witnessing history in Washington, D.C. He also felt an obligation to continue the legacy of his very good friend, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We often discuss being born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, because my parents too were born and raised in Birmingham, and his parents, just like my parents, migrated here to Chicago from the Deep South. And we spoke about that perseverance, that resilience so often. And I just spoke with his wife, Zenobia, and she wanted to send a very sincere thank you to everyone for all the love and the support that they have given to him over the years, to her husband. And she said she also wanted people to continue his legacy by this: making the world a better place. It was a lifelong daily goal of Timuel Black. He did just that every day, and he was instrumental in so many special moments of history, including the election of the first African-American mayor of Chicago and the first African-American woman to be elected to the United States Senate, and she was here, Carol Moseley Braun from Chicago. The history books, in the end, will say his name for generations to come. 102 years old, Judy and Ron.
Hey, if you like that video, be sure to subscribe to our ABC7 Chicago YouTube channel.